This is Martin Carkson, Communication Studies Professor at Colorado State University and the Director of the CSU Center for Public Liberation. This is just a short video. I've been going around the state working with Above the Noise, a special project that's a collaboration between the CPD, the Rocky Mountain Public Media, the Colorado Media Project, and the Colorado Press Association, designed to kind of build capacity in local newsrooms to engage their community better and actually help their community engage themselves better. So in particular, we've been going around showing the Undivide Us movie, which I'll put a link on the chat if you're interested in kind of getting more information. And I've been getting a little bit of an intro to kind of set up the movie and talked a little bit about the work of the CPD and what we're helping to do to help these newsrooms build capacity. So I thought I would just kind of record it, just to have it to see if it's interesting to other people and maybe encourage more people to kind of check out the film. Film's not available online yet, but you can kind of work through their website to get permission to kind of screen it. So I hope you get your local library, local university, local civic groups, bring people together and watch this. And feel free to use this video if it helps in any way. I'm going to share my screen now. Yeah, so that's the Above the Noise. Again, there'll be a link in the comments to kind of talk a little bit more about that. My name again is Martin Carkson. My work at the CBD has always been about, how do we help communities have the conversations they need to have? The theory underneath the CBD is really that democracy requires pretty high quality communication. We have to have really good conversations, and unfortunately, we're not really wired for them. I do a lot of work in social psychology and brain science, and just the unfortunate reality that we're much more wired for polarization and outrage than we are for collaboration and deliberation and kind of engaging each other. And on top of that, then there's a lot of bad faith actors and a lot of systems, our political system, media system, social media, certainly, that actually thrive on dividing us and kind of bringing out the worst of human nature. And so a lot of the work of the CBD and what we're trying to infuse in these newsrooms is the skills to avoid triggering the worst of human nature, the simple stories that we love, and actually tap into the best of human nature, which is our creativity, our empathy, our connection to place that can really kind of bring out the best in the us versus them kind of aspect of human nature, right? So some information, you can stop there if you want to kind of dig in. The resource page in particular, I'll post a link. It just has a lot of other resources. Part of these is getting people in these communities to start engaging, kind of thinking about this, right? One of the questions we ask at this event, this won't be interactive on the video, is we ask people to kind of, which of these words kind of best fits your perspective? These are the actual answers from in Denver when we showed it at the Rocky Mountain Public Media kind of facilities there. And this, unfortunately, is the unfortunate reality of what typically happens when we ask this question. There's a mix of negative and positive terms, and all the negative ones get picked far much more than any of the positive ones. This is the work that we have to do in our communities. We have to change this because, again, democracy requires high quality communication. This shows clearly we're not close to getting that. And so what are the steps that we could do to start changing this around? I also show this from the Pew Research. If you ask people what word describes politics to you, it's quite the hunt to find the one positive term in the middle of all those. But clearly, politics is supposed to be kind of the art of making decisions together, how we get democracy to work. So this kind of negative aspect of politics is something that we need to change, and it really can change at the local level. A lot more trust at the local level, a lot more trust in our media and some of our institutions. So how do we really start kind of building up the innovative things happening in the local community? So to set up the film, I make two key points. And for me, these are the two biggest challenges our communities are dealing with right now. And first is I like the new term kind of information disorder. And this is kind of a combination for me, partly of just information overload, just our ability to create information and our ability to share information has just exponentially exploded. And you're seeing that kind of get worse and worse. This might be a new word for some of y'all, but these are zettabytes, right? Now we've got machines that are constantly producing data for us, more information that we've ever just can even imagine possible kind of coming at us, right? And what's important there is when we have so much information, our ability to create and share it has exploded. Our ability to make sense of it, to process it, to take it through what we need to do to kind of get the value out of that information has significantly lagged. It doesn't compare to the growth in just noise, right? We need to move from just kind of raw data and information to information where we start making distinctions between better information and problematic information. Then we need to make connections and really kind of knowledge, and this is kind of more solid things that we can really kind of rely on. That leads us to insight of kind of picking the best that helps us make better decisions and work together. And ultimately, we want wisdom, that we're making better decisions. We got quality judgment. But because of information overload, we have so much of that first part. And then you add to that misinformation, disinformation, malinformation. Truth Decay, one of my favorite titles, the Rand Institute, of starting to kind of explore this, of how difficult it is now to just make distinctions between good information and bad information. This is Claire Wardle's work in terms of these three, which are important terms everyone should know now. Misinformation is just sharing bad information that you thought was okay. That happens a lot in the internet. Disinformation we're seeing more and more, unfortunately, is when people are purposely creating and sending false information. The reality is that's often rewarded in our political system. And then malinformation is, you're just using information to harm. So dealing with this makes it so hard to deal with the information overload. So instead of going through this process, we often run into this process, right? And that's the biggest challenge we have. Journalism and expertise, universities are system structures that help us try to do this, but they're having their own challenges, right? The loss of trust in both those institutions. So having to rethink and rebuild those institutions and reconnect and rebuild the trust is a big part of the work that we're doing. That can be done at a local level, right? The second challenge is polarization. And every single one of these events that we've run, I think we've run about 10 of them so far. When we ask people to pick what words describes kind of quality public discourse, polarization is almost always the first one, like it was, as I showed you a minute ago, right? So I have two beliefs about polarization that are particularly important, I think. First is I do truly believe it is our number one issue. When we're polarized, we cannot function as a democratic body. Facts don't work. The quality of argument doesn't really matter in a sense. We have so little kind of trust and connections. We make so many assumptions about the other side that I think it's really difficult to move the needle on any of the challenges, any of the issues we care about, regardless of your political perspective. When we're polarized, polarization kind of eats everything up. The second belief, though, gives us a little bit of hope that the polarization is greatly exaggerated, right? Actually, I have an hour-long session that I really dig into a lot of this. That's linked in the resource guide if anyone's interested. But the basic idea is we're not nearly as polarized as we think, right? There's a lot of, again, bad faith actors that benefit from the polarization. There's a lot of exaggeration. We make assumptions. One of my recent articles I dug into is kind of explained is this a concept of imaginary enemies, that we hate people for things that they don't actually believe. Right? And again, social media can kind of exacerbate that kind of even worse, right? Now, the reason I believe both of these, even though they seem to kind of go against each other, is the perception of polarization is more important than the reality of it. So the fact that we think we're this polarized, that we think the other side is so problematic, fuels enough of the problem, right? The good news of number two, though, is if it's exaggerated, if we figure out ways of coming together in productive ways, we can expose that. And it's not that we're going to all come together and agree, but if we shift it from kind of the exaggerated differences and conflict to the actual, tend to be much more manageable, right? And we can find enough common ground, particularly in a local community, to build off that and to deal with our differences much more productively. Differences are going to be inherent. Conflict's going to be inherent in a diverse democracy. We need to learn in our communities how to deal with that conflict better and how to resist some of the kind of misconceptions of polarization. Right? So with that, we go into the movie, which really kind of digs into those last 2 points in some important ways and gives people some resources. So I invite you, I'll put the link in the comments for you to watch the trailer and potentially request a screening to show it in your community. It sparks really good discussion. On their resource link, they have a living room conversations discussion guide that we use after the film to allow people in small groups to process the film and talk to each other. People have been really enjoying this and getting a lot of hope out of it, right? And then I come back at the end, we hear from some of the groups, and then I provide this, that these are all resources that are linked in my resource page that you can get from that QR code, or you can also look on the comments. The main point here is growing polarization, really scary levels that we haven't really ever seen, particularly in terms of effective polarization with an A, which is when we just don't like each other. Ideological polarization is more when we're split on issues. We're dealing with more of the former right now. But the good news is that the counteraction is kind of coming, right? More and more organizations across the country and in our communities that are rising up, focused on bringing people together. I explained that my number one insight from 20 years of doing this work is that our communities need bridging organizations. They need organizations that are designed to bring people together in more productive ways. So these are some just great resources. Some of these we've had at our events. The Listening First Coalition, I'll just mention, if you go to that website, they have icons over, a couple hundred organizations that are doing this work. The National Coalition for Dialogue and Deliberation. I've been deeply involved in them. ncdd.org does great work to kind of support this. But all these organizations, national organizations, some have local chapters, some have great resources. Living Room Conversations has these 2-page guides to how to have a conversation about 150 different topics. Invite a few people over to your house and just use that to spark a different, better conversation, and to rediscover the art of conversation and bringing together and pushing back on the misconceptions. And then on the bottom, a few other kind of videos to watch, bring people together, show them a 15-minute video and spark conversation. Monica Guzman's work in particular, I just love. She's got a great a podcast called The Braver Way as well that you should check out, and a book that I've never thought of it that way, right? Which is just a handbook for this kind of work. Right? So that's it. I hope you shoot me an email if you've got questions or interest. Dig into some of those resources on the resource page, and I hope you help your community have these conversations and start building the connections that we need to have so we can take on our shared problems more productively. Thank you.